generally, a word of advice, especially if you want to add some elements of British or regional cuisine to your trip presentation. Most of the documentaries that I've been suggesting to you throughout this semester include some elements of regional foods. So when you have people traveling in England and Scotland and basically across the British Isles, showing some interesting places, very often some of these places are related to food. So this is a very important part of regional identity and also regional tourist attractions. Of course, if we compare English culinary traditions with Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland as well. Well, Northern Ireland is basically the same as Irish cuisine, which, surprise, surprise, has always been seen as a kind of gourmet tradition compared to the English cuisine, which is very similar. I've been in both, and you can find good food both in Ireland and in Britain. So it's quite an interesting story why there was this prejudice against British and especially English food, and a great admiration for Irish food. So if you want more, probably it would be a good idea to explore Irish food as such, because the kind of food popular in the north is more typical for Ireland in general. But if we look at the regions, one thing that is very clear is that these regions were definitely poorer than England. So what we have are people trying to make do with whatever was available. So it could be some cheap parts of meat or organ meat, or some grains like the oats in Scotland, or of course potatoes in Ireland. They could be very creative with very basic and simple and cheap ingredients. So what we have in Wales is again the kind of poor people's cuisine, compared especially to England and to the traditions of the full English breakfast and the Sunday roast. Poor people in Wales did not really have that. What they had was again a kind of stew made of meat and vegetables. This time this regional version is called cole, as you can see here. There were some kinds of foods pretending to be something else, like Glamorgan sausage and Welsh rarebit. It's sometimes called Welsh rabbit as well, although it has nothing to do with rabbit or with sausage for that matter. These are, as you can see, Welsh rarebit or rabbit is basically bread and cheese with some spices and condiments. Served hot, so it's kind of fried cheese with bread. Glamorgan sausage is mostly leeks, but it is shaped in the form resembling a sausage. So this was a kind of food that poor people who could not afford meat would eat on daily basis. Another very typical and actually quite a rare regional tradition in Wales is laverbread, and this is something taken from the sea, a kind of sea vegetable, seaweed, which is eaten mostly in the form of a kind of mush. It's not bread. For a long time I believed it was some sort of baked product, like pastry with this sea vegetable added, but it's very rarely used in the bread. It's used as a kind of mush or as an ingredient in other recipes, like stuffing for the chicken, for example. So it's quite good. If you have ever tried the Asian sea vegetables or the nori, it's basically the same idea. So it's not only the Asians who came up with the idea of eating sea greens. Poor people in Wales did that as well. Some more regional varieties. Cornish pasty, a small pie from Cornwall, with different fillings. The most traditional one is again meat and vegetables, but it could be apples, it could be all kinds of fillings, sweet or savory. The idea was that these were small pies that could be taken out and basically eaten on the go, mostly by the workers in coal mines or tin mines, really, in Cornwall. So they would take this as a lunch, because basically they would spend the entire day in those mines. Another variation of a small handheld pasty is from Bedfordshire clanger, and this is the idea of actually mixing, because half of this pasty is savory, usually some sort of meat and vegetables, and half is sweet, usually apples with cinnamon or some other additions. So the idea is you never know which side is which. So you have a lunch with a dessert, but you never know whether you will start with the savory part or the sweet part, because it's like one handheld pasty called Bedfordshire clanger, typical for Bedfordshire, if you recall. There are some regional specialties like Staffordshire oat cakes, which are, as you can see, oat cakes with some sort of filling, meat and cheese usually, or Coventry God cakes, typical for the city of Coventry, in West Midlands, I think, which apparently were especially popular on a Sunday. That's why they were called God cakes, because people would buy them going back from the church. Some other regional traditions, the seafood, all kinds of seafood, and many towns along the sea coast have quite a lot of local specialties. Here you can see a stand with some sort of local seafoods, including oysters and prawns and jellied eels. You can see the jellied eels here. So a type of fish in jelly to be eaten cold. Crawfish tails and periwinkles. Periwinkles are small snails, sea snails, that can be found in some places along the coast, and they're quite popular as a local delicacy. Some more crab. There are some places, mostly in Norfolk, that are quite famous for crab fishing, and you can find quite fancy dishes made of crab there, especially the village of Cromer, which even has like a special type of Cromer crab fished locally. Another thing, we have potted shrimps from Morecambe Bay, which is also in northern England, and apparently especially tasty small shrimps are fished there. Another local variation I love seafood. I haven't tried these things. I would love to try them, really. So vegetable whelks, another type of mollusk, another type of sea snail, from Kent this time. The ones that are probably most general, so not so localized, are kippers. Kippers are known everywhere, especially in Scotland, but this is a kind of dish usually made of herrings, smoked herrings. So here we have kippers served with a piece of bread and a fried egg. Very popular way of serving them. But yeah, this is something I tried, kippers, in Scotland. This is another thing that they probably started doing because of thrift and poverty, and a very popular way to cook them is to actually cook them in milk. So they dip them in milk and they kind of heat them in milk. Quite good if you like seafood. So this leaves us with desserts and festive foods. So here we have first of all Christmas. And you can see some typical dishes for Christmas. The most popular food for Christmas dinner would be some sort of bird, turkey. Less popular, but still possible. Goose or even chicken, with cranberry sauce with Brussels sprouts. Apparently Brussels sprouts are a Christmas thing in Britain. Of course, the British tradition is for the big Christmas dinner. They do not have the Christmas Eve dinner like we do in Poland. The most important, the big family get-together is on the first day of Christmas. This is this big dinner, and it also includes some special desserts, like the Christmas pudding, a very old tradition going back probably to the Middle Ages. This is a kind of gingerbread with lots of spices, which is steamed, so it's quite heavy. It has quite a lot of fat, and the traditional way of serving that is to actually bring it to the table flaming. So they pour some spirit over this and they set it aflame, and it creates this kind of centerpiece. Another popular Christmas dessert is mince pies. So the pies with mincemeat. And then again, the whole story whether mincemeat is sweet or savory. It is always sweet, although originally, but by originally I mean the Middle Ages, the recipe included some meat or animal fat, like suet, so not butter, but the kind of beef fat. Now most modern recipes do not have it. They have just the dried fruits and nuts and spices and things like that, and no meat, although it's still called the mincemeat. Then we move to Easter, so another big Christian celebration connected with festive foods. The most typical dinner dish is roast lamb, of course, with all the symbolic associations with spring and Easter and the resurrection of Jesus Christ and all that. But there are other traditions, food-related traditions that are perhaps a bit less known outside of Britain. One is a type of sweet breads or buns called hot cross buns, and here you have them here. They are decorated with this very characteristic cross design. They are traditionally eaten on Good Friday, so of course the remembrance of the crucifixion of Jesus, but rather than have it as a day of fasting, they have those very tasty little buns with red currants and raisins, and yeah, they're quite good. Another popular Easter sweet dish is simnel cake, and this is the way it looks. It's a kind of heavy fruit cake with lots of dried fruits. These things go back a long way, and this was really when the dried fruits were the only type of fruit available in winter and early spring. So basically that's why you have all those sweet festive dishes with lots of dried fruits. Sometimes some alcohol is added. For simnel cake, the decoration is quite important because they use the almond paste, they use the marzipan for decoration, and traditionally there are little balls of marzipan. Traditionally there were 12 or sometimes 13 of them to signify 12 apostles, or 12 apostles with Jesus, and this is the way to kind of combine symbolism and sweet dishes. Nowadays the most typical thing for Easter is chocolate eggs, like this type here, the cream eggs by Cadbury, and generally chocolate. This is the time when all the producers of chocolate goods have probably the best sales records of the year. So sometimes people hide those chocolate eggs in the garden, and children try to find them, or they just sit in front of the television or wherever and eat those chocolate eggs. Sometimes they are filled with some sort of cream filling. So that's it. Some more traditional British sweets, and I would say traditionally British cuisine is very sweet, and there's been a national passion for sweet stuffs and for sweet dishes going back at least to the Tudor period. I would say that many of the royals and aristocrats paid dearly for their sweet tooth, like by losing their teeth. This is why I would say King Henry VIII had most of his health problems with the excessive weight, with probably diabetes and some kind of ulcers on his legs. I would say cut the sugar, but of course they didn't know then. Then Queen Elizabeth I, who lost all her teeth, and before they were black, and it's kind of horrible stories, but apparently the British still have a national obsession with desserts and sweet dishes, and some of them are delicious. So another, I would say, tradition, perhaps a whole meal in itself, is tea. Tea, not really as a drink, but as a whole meal, sometimes called high tea. And here we have the most traditional way of serving that on this kind of 3-tier tray, and you have the first tier, the bottom tier, with sandwiches and savory things, savory snacks, mostly sandwiches. Another English invention. There was a Lord Sandwich who wanted to eat his snacks while playing cards. So the idea of putting something between two slices of bread is taken from there. The second tier is scones with jam and cream. Scones are a kind of buns, a bit denser than typical sweet buns. And the third one is little sweets, chocolates, small pieces of cake, and this is all served as an accompaniment to the tea itself. Again, now it's more of a kind of hotel fare, kind of fancy posh thing. You can go to a fancy tea house and be served this thing. Probably not every Sunday, but once in a long while. It's kind of tradition and ritual in its own right. Some more sweet dishes, popular sweet dishes from Britain. Banoffee pie. So we have a pie, but it's definitely a sweet pie this time. Banana and toffee. Banoffee. Apple pie with the crust on top. Also sponge cakes, the most famous, named after Queen Victoria, with jam and some sort of cream spread between two layers of sponge cake. Crumbles. Crumble is a kind of fruit dessert with a crust of shortbread. So the most British thing is a rhubarb crumble. There are some places in England that specialize in growing rhubarb, so this is what it's used for. Some more things. Bakewell tart, again a kind of crispy tarts with fruit or jam, and two more 19th century ideas, also kind of poor people's sweets. One is bread and butter pudding, which was a dish reusing pieces of old bread, but baking them again with milk and eggs and raisins. So it's a kind of reconstituted dessert. Another one is called Spotted Dick. One of those funny names. And as you can see, it's a kind of steamed cake with red currants or cranberries or raisins. The favorite nowadays in the pubs and restaurants would probably be sticky toffee pudding, which is another colonial invention using a lot of dates and kind of sweet syrup. It's horribly sweet, but it's very, very tasty as well. The last slide, some more traditional puddings, which are not exactly baked goods. So three things that you can make with a bit of seasonal fruits, a bit of whipped cream, and some pieces of biscuits. One possibility is a trifle, the other possibility is Eton mess, and the third possibility is Knickerbocker glory. So as you can see, it's a kind of layered dessert every time. Trifle is fruits, usually berries. Strawberries are quite popular, with some sort of pieces of sponge cake and whipped cream. Eton mess is the same, but instead of sponge cake you have meringue. And Knickerbocker glory is like Eton mess, but you also add ice cream. So it's like the kind of fancy dessert using strawberries, sometimes raspberries, summer fruits generally. And the last thing here is custard, which is a kind of sweet cream made of milk or eggs with lots of sugar. It's kind of loose pudding, really, in a consistency that's very often used with all those tarts and pies. So there we go. A I hope you're not too hungry, or maybe you were eating while listening to that. Once again, please look at the interactive map called the Taste Atlas. And yeah, see you next time. Thank you.